Good morning. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Women in High Tech's first special edition Executive Women's Forum of 2021. We're excited to have a casual and crucial COVID conversation with our Indiana Health Commissioner, Dr. Kristina Box. Dr. Box, thank you so much for joining us today. We're so excited to have you with us and to learn from you today. And thank you so much to all of our virtual guests for spending some time with us this afternoon. I'm Rebecca Borman. I'm the Managing Director of Sales and Services for Baltic Logics, and we're an Indiana-based national IT managed services firm. And I also have the pleasure of serving as the President of Women in High Tech. We're delighted to be here with you all today for Women in High Tech's 2021 kickoff event, and we have a lot to celebrate today. February is Black History Month, and Women in High Tech recognizes and celebrates African American history, not just in February, but year-round. We're also excited to be gathered today because it is International Day of Women and Girls in Science as declared by the United Nations General Assembly. The mission of this day is to achieve full and equal access to and participation in science for women and girls and to further achieve gender equality in the empowerment of women and girls. So this is in complete alignment with our mission here at Women in High Tech. And we at Women in High Tech would especially like to recognize and thank all of our Indiana female scientific leaders and our healthcare heroes for their many accomplishments, especially those accomplishments that have helped create solutions for problems caused by the global pandemic. Thank you all so much. So in addition to hosting this event on International Women and Girls in Science Day, Women in High Tech has also created virtual flyers to help celebrate and honor women and girls in science. I hope maybe you guys have seen some of them on social media this week. So we'd like to encourage you all to participate and show your support for women and girls in science by creating your own virtual flyer and sharing it on social media today. We're sending out the link in the chat. I think I see it coming through now. So you can download that template, upload your picture, maybe put a quote of maybe a famous woman in science and share it on your social media. So we look forward to seeing those this afternoon. For those of you who might be new to our organization, Women in High Tech exists to change the landscape of women represented in STEM to be equally inclusive to all. The idea began in 1999 when an Eli Lilly scientist and an IU University academic discovered very few women working in high-tech jobs in Indianapolis. So these women decided to change that paradigm and they founded Women in High Tech as a new nonprofit organization in Indianapolis. To achieve our mission, Women in High Tech works to connect female STEM professionals with one another in our Indiana community. Our members and sponsors represent a wide variety of STEM fields, including life sciences, accounting, engineering, psychology, statistics, and information technology, and so much more. And our members work as engineers, analysts, scientists, healthcare workers, business development folks, marketers, educators, and so many other STEM roles. There's no denying that the STEM fields have long been male dominated. And that's not because people don't want change, it's because organizations like Women in High Tech need support to make that change happen. So from guiding young women through some of their first science experiments to recognizing industry-leading experts in our signature biannual Leading Light Awards and Scholarship Gala, we provide a support system and networking opportunities to engage female professionals, STEM professionals, collegiate women, and girls who aspire to pursue careers in STEM. When we work together on a level playing field, the outcomes are stronger for everyone. Women in High Tech wants to see the STEM industries transformed by collaboration. Every day we promote, support, and cheer on women and male allies to make it happen in order to change the landscape of women represented in STEM to be equally inclusive to all. Over the last 2+ decades, Women in High Tech has blazed a trail for supporting, recognizing, and advancing outstanding women and girls pursuing STEM fields in Indiana. In that time, Women in High Tech has become a pillar of the local STEM community through its educational, professional development, recognition, mentoring, and networking programs, which provide valuable resources to champion collegiate and career women and provide STEM exposure opportunities for K-12 girls. So today, Women in High Tech has over 50 corporate and collegiate sponsors and almost 2,000 members in Indiana. And I have to take a moment here to thank all of our sponsors for their continued support and engagement. We appreciate your generosity in helping us continue to advance our mission. And I also have to thank Women in High Tech's all volunteer working board of directors and emeritus members and our member volunteers. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for sharing your time, talents, and treasures with Women in High Tech. Today, I'd also like to give a big thank you to our past president, Angela B. Freeman, and our Executive Women Forum Director, Linda Calvin, for bringing us an event today. And you'll get to meet both of these amazing ladies here in just a few minutes. So before we go to today's event, I want to share with you that Women in High Tech has a lot in store for you this year. Backed by popular demand, Women in High Tech launched round 2 of our Clickside Chat series last month. The Women in High Tech Clickside Chat series is a 1-hour online Zoom meeting held for a small group of registered members. These interactive sessions provide a mid-week touch point for our members to connect, engage, and encourage one another via a moderated discussion format relative to a respective topic hosted by a Women in High Tech board members. So some of the upcoming topics include what I learned in 20. That one is up on February 17th. We have a check-in on your 2021 goals and resolutions. We have a series on self-care best practices and another one on interviewing tips and best practices. So this series is held on Wednesdays, every other Wednesday from 4 to 5. And registration is open now for all sessions. So please visit our website, womeninhightech.org, to sign up and join a Clickside chat with us. We also have our first virtual book club coming up on March 9th from 6 to 7 p.m. We're currently reading The Woman Who Smashed Codes, a true story of love, spies, and the unlikely heroine who outwitted America's enemies by Jason Fagan. And I have some exciting news to share that we found out a couple weeks. The author, Jason Fagan, will be joining us for our virtual meeting next month. And one other thing that I think is really cool about this book, this story is about an Indiana woman. So it's not too late to grab the book and join us. And please go to our website to join us for this virtual discussion. Women in High Tech is also looking to grow some of our committees this year, and we'll be sharing those opportunities with you in a few weeks. So we have a lot more in store for you this year. So if you haven't already, please go to our website and subscribe to our email list so we can stay in touch for information on future programming, volunteer opportunities, and Women in High Tech newsletters. Okay. I'm so excited to get ready for this program this afternoon and to hear from Dr. Box. Thank you so much again for joining us. I'm going to go ahead and turn this over to Angela Freeman, our past president, and then shortly after you'll also meet Linda Calvin, our Executive Women's Forum Director. Angela, over to you.
Thank you, Rebecca. Happy Black History Month, everyone, and happy International Day of Women and Girls in Science. Wow. We get a twofer. That's pretty awesome, right? As Rebecca mentioned, my name is Angela B. Freeman. I am an intellectual property and patent attorney at Barnes & Thornburg here in Indianapolis. I'm a former molecular biologist and genetic researcher. So yes, I am a woman in science myself. So I'm super excited for today. And as well as Rebecca mentioned, I'm the past president of Women in High Tech. And in what is seemingly becoming a short-lived tradition, I'm super excited to have an opportunity to bring to our Women in High Tech audience another special edition Executive Women's Forum during Black History Month that focuses around diversity, equity, and inclusion. If you all been with us for any amount of time, this has kind of been a repeated theme over the last few years, and we've put a little twist on it this year. I think everything's got a little twist on it this year, right? We're super excited to bring to you today's program. And I'm even more excited to be joined by my good friend and fellow board member, my partner in crime and law, if that's possible, and today's co-moderator, Women in High Tech's Executive Women's Forum Director, Dr. Linda Calvin, Vice President of the School of Information Technology at Ivy Tech Community College. If you've had the opportunity to see or download the beautiful Women in High Tech flyer celebrating today's International Day of Women and Girls in Science, as pronounced by the UN, as Rebecca mentioned, those flyers were a product of Linda's creative mastermind. So I'd like to thank her for her hard work and effort in putting those together and thinking about the impact that would make, as well as working with me for today's program. So thank you so much, babe. Linda and I are super delighted to have with us today Indiana's top woman in science and health, Dr. Kristina Box. Y'all better give it up for her. I mean, come on, she's the woman running things as far as science is concerned in the state of Indiana. We're super excited to have her with us today. Dr. Box has been the state health commissioner since 2017. And she's been a practicing obstetrician and gynecologist. So a baby doctor, right? We know her as a baby doctor in Indianapolis for 30 years, where she's focused her medical practice on women and children's health. With this passion, Dr. Box has been responsible for many advancements for women in health, building the first multidisciplinary women's center at Community Health Network. She's developed critical partnerships with area children's hospitals to improve care and decrease healthcare costs. She's focused a lot of research studies on the disparate impact of women and infant mortality in diverse women, and she's led efforts to ensure that low-income women receive very important and free healthcare screening. So done a lot of work and advocacy on behalf of women and their medical rights and their rights to healthcare. Dr. Box is also a wife of over 35 years, which for all the wives out there, Lord knows that needs a round of applause just for itself, and has 4 adult children. Come on now. Including her daughter, Lauren, who is my friend and colleague at Barnes and Thornburg, and who I'd really like to publicly thank, because Lauren has really been a conduit to make this all happen today. Again, today we are so pleased to have Dr. Box here to speak with the women in high tech community and dispel. I mean, it's really important. One of the reasons we were so serious about having this event was to dispel a lot of the misinformation and disinformation matriculating in so many of our communities about COVID-19, about the vaccine, and really to dispel that with real facts, real science, real data that's related to the disease and the vaccine, and with some specificity around Indiana itself, right? We're hearing national trends, national numbers, but I don't know that even I personally heard what's specifically happening in Indiana. So again, super happy to have Dr. Box here with us today. Dr. Box, we thank you so much for joining us. And please feel free to start your presentation whenever you see fit. Thank you so much.
Sounds great. Thank you so much, Rebecca and Angela and Linda. I am so honored to be here. I'm going to tell you, if I go off camera, it's because I have gotten a nosebleed about 5 minutes ago. And if I start to have problems, I'll just keep right on going with my presentation. But rather than having you watch me pinch my nose, and you will know that's happening, obviously, because I'll sound very nasal. I'm sorry about that, but I just wanted to let you know in case it happens. But I'm really excited to be here today. I mean, to be here with women, who are devoted to high tech, women who have, educations and background in STEM, which is so, so important. And, when you talk about me being kind of the top women doctor with regards to this pandemic, I want to also point out that, Dr. Lindsay Weaver, my chief medical officer, who has really been leading the vaccine process, has been critical. Dr. Jen Sullivan, who's leading FSSA, has been a critical component of this. And really our partnerships with Terry Stingdon, who's a nurse and very, very engaged, has been critical with regards to infant mortality and child abuse and helping children to grow healthily. So really excited. I'm also want to say it's so important that we're here during Black History Month, because this pandemic, unfortunately, through COVID-19, like in every other health issue we have, we see significant disparities in how our racial minorities and ethnicities are impacted greater. Maybe because they're frontline workers that don't have the opportunity to work from home. They're driving buses or fixing the shelves, or they're in our healthcare field, or whatever that issue. Maybe because they are, have many people in a household and can't separate and quarantine easily at that point in time. Maybe it's because they don't have access to healthcare and good advice as to when and go to get tested. So we have really tried to address that, and yet we see those underlying comorbidities that are higher in our racial minorities impacting not only the seriousness of the illness, but unfortunately deaths associated with COVID-19. Let's bring up my first slide, if you would, please. Perfect. And next slide. So I just want to give you a little background, because as women in STEM and women in executive positions, you know, I had been an obstetrician gynecologist for over 30 years. I had been engaged socially with substance use disorder in pregnant women, with helping develop women's clinics and access to free screening for women that economically were disadvantaged and couldn't have it. So when it came up in 2017 in October, when they asked me to come and interview for the job as a state health commissioner, I want you to know my original reaction was like, oh, I don't have my master's in public health, and you know, I just don't think I'm the right person for the job. But don't worry, Governor, I'm going to keep volunteering. I'm going to be there and help with the Indiana Perinatal Quality Improvement Collaborative. I'm going to continue to work in substance use disorder. And the next day when they called me back and said, well, would you at least come talk with the governor about this? I was like, yeah, it's rude if I don't do this. And it was my daughter, Lauren, who said, you know, Mom, if God keeps opening this door, maybe sooner or later, you're going to have to step through it. I did. And here I am 3 years later. And I've got to admit to you, it's not infrequent that I get an email from someone in the state who doesn't like what I'm doing that says, why in the world is a gynecologist leading the state of Indiana at this time? And I think the point that I want to make here is that really, it's about who you surround yourself with, right? This is not my area of specialty, but we can certainly surround ourselves with the good research, the good data, the good information, and the good people that help us to make the right decision. So leadership is not always about being the expert about what particular thing you're trying to lead. I will say that I have met a lot of other challenges that I didn't expect. I kind of took this job thinking infant mortality and maternal mortality, which is my heart. And we have made some incredible strides there that I'm happy to say that our infant mortality rate in the state of Indiana has gone from 7.5 to 6.5, at the lowest that it's been since we started keeping this data back in the 1800s. And more importantly to me is that we've seen a decline in our Black infant mortality rate down to where it's only 1.9 times the white infant mortality rate. Now, that's a 30% drop. That's still not acceptable. So I'm certainly by no means taking a victory lap here, but for the first time, we are really making inroads, and the programs that we're doing, I think, are resonating with our women of color and with our women of minority in certain ethnic groups. So I'm really excited to say that we have made some inroads. We also had hepatitis A outbreak we've been dealing with for over a year. And then, as you probably recall, we had done so well getting smoking down in our junior high and high school. And then all of a sudden the vaping came out. And I have to say, I'm ashamed that the federal government let the FDA approve this stuff and let it mislead the public the way that it did. I will tell you that many students and many young adults, when we started asking them about vaping, they had no concept that there was nicotine in the products that they were using, and we were just addicting a whole new generation. And unfortunately, we had a series of deaths associated with those vaping related incidents. So we're continuing to work on that messaging. But really, obviously, what has been overwhelming since about this time last year, really, has been the COVID-19 pandemic. Next slide, please. And that's what we have spent the bulk of our time on in the past. Next slide. So this is data from Tuesday, and I can tell you that the way these numbers have changed, instead of new tests administered being 25,000, that's 57,960. So that varies from day to day. We've had about 1,225 went up to 1,762 positive cases. Our positivity rate is continuing to go down, which we're really happy to see, about 6.1%. I keep kidding Fred Payne, who is our workforce development individual and does all the workforce for Indiana. His unemployment rate's down to 4.3, and I want numbers as good as his. And new deaths have been 26 in the last 24 hours, and total deaths, unfortunately, right at 11,604. Next slide, please. I want to take a minute to talk about this slide. You know, we have a lot of people that talk about the fact that the State Department of Health is trying to inflate our numbers of deaths in order to try to put pressure politically to keep things closed down in the state of Indiana. I always think that's interesting, why I would ever want to overcount our number of deaths here in the state. And so when we look at it, there are individuals that question whether there are even excess deaths in the state of Indiana or across the United States. This shows you the death count from 2016 to 2020. And as you can see, we average about 65,000 deaths or so. And in 2020, our preliminary number is right at 78,849. And that really equates exactly with where we are on our COVID-19 deaths at almost 12,000 deaths. So I really think that's an important thing, next slide, that we take note of. About 1/3 of our cases have been in our young people under the age of 30, because obviously they're more social and highly unlikely to stop being social. Also, we have had about 45% of our cases occur in that age range from 30 to 60. Those are the individuals out that are obviously out working and exposed more publicly on a regular basis. I think what I want you to really notice here is that only about 23% of our cases have been among individuals that are 60 and older. They do a better job of protecting themselves, and they have a better ability to stay home a lot of times. But 93% of our deaths have been in individuals that are 60 and over. Next slide, please. And this is important as we start to talk about why are we actually doing things vaccination-wise the way we are. A year ago, we were on the cusp of this pandemic. We were working and preparing for it. We were waiting for our first case. We were figuring out if we were even going to be able to test for the virus when it got here. And now, at that time, we were actually going, are we ever going to have a vaccine for it? Because coronavirus vaccines have been incredibly difficult because they do mutate so often. And they've been working on one for over about 10 years. So there wasn't a vaccine. We didn't know a lot about the disease at the time. And since that time, we have learned a tremendous amount since our first case started on March the 6th. And then our first death, unfortunately, was about 10 days later. We now have 2 vaccines that really have been built on work, as I mentioned, that started over 10 years ago and was really just kind of fast-tracked. Both of the vaccines are what we call mRNA virus vaccines, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. We also had an EUA just applied for by Johnson & Johnson, which is a different kind of vaccine that actually uses a very benign virus to deliver the particular genetic code that we want the body to make so that the body's immune system will react against it. When we look at this, the rates have been phenomenal. The mRNA vaccines have a 94 to 95% efficacy in the clinical trials. And if you compare that to a typical good flu year, in a good flu year, we might have 40 to 60% of the different strains covered by that flu vaccine. So this is really overwhelming and far beyond what we thought it would be. I think it's really important to note that both of our first 2 vaccines are 2-dose vaccines, which obviously in public health makes it a little more difficult to get people back for that second dose. When we looked at this, people worried that it was developed too quickly. This Operation Warp Speed, I think particularly really freaked some people out. And in reality, the warp speed part of it was that we were actually manufacturing these vaccines before they even were shown to be successful, before they even were shown that they could get their emergency use authorization, so that if they qualified, we were going to have vaccine ready to put in arms. The other part of this that went much more quickly than usual is the phase 3 clinical trials, because we had so many people raise their hand and volunteer to be in those clinical trials because they wanted to get vaccinated and they felt it was important that we got a vaccine as quickly as possible. Next slide, please. So Pfizer and Moderna are what we call mRNA virus vaccines. And what that means is that when you got your injection, if you got an injection with this, you actually got mRNA, messenger RNA, that would go into the cytoplasm, not the nucleus of the cell where the DNA is, but into the cytoplasm and cause our ribosomes to make a protein that our body would then recognize as being, and that's actually a protein too, that is the spike protein on the outside of this virus. Our body then recognizes that as being foreign and makes what we call antibodies, or its own immune response to that. And they have been very successful, very safe, and they do not alter your DNA at all because it's not even going into the nucleus of your cell where your DNA is. Johnson & Johnson, as I mentioned, is what we call a viral vector vaccine, which means that we took the genetic code for that external spike protein on the virus and we put it in an adenovirus, which is a virus for another type of virus for a common mild cold. And then we gave that to individuals, and that was a killed virus. So you don't have to worry about the fact that that actually replicates in your system. But that causes the immune system once again to rev up against this particular spike protein. Very, very few adverse reactions have been reported. I think right now the cases are 4 to 5 cases of anaphylaxis, which is overwhelming severe allergic reaction per 1 million individuals. Have we had people that have had a sore arm, a red arm, irritation, maybe even a headache, an achiness, or low-grade fever? That's actually a really good sign that your immune system is working. It doesn't mean that you got COVID-19. It means that your immune system is working well to actually react to this particular virus that we want you to develop an immunity to. The CDC carefully monitors any adverse reaction through their VAERS system, which is the Vaccine Adverse Effects System. And it's really nice because they came up with a Safe V thing that you can actually scan at the site when you get your immunization. And then it automatically sends you out text messages. It registers you and sends you out text messages to remind you to report any adverse reactions you have. So it's a very easy way. And if there's a significant reaction, CDC actually through that will reach out to you directly and discuss that reaction. Not every patient does that, but we strongly encourage them. I want everybody to understand that this vaccine, just like the influenza vaccine, may not prevent you from getting COVID-19. It may not even prevent you from carrying it around asymptomatically in your nasopharynx area, even though you may never get symptoms associated with it. And that's part of right now, as we do more studies, the reason you need to be masked all the time still, even if you've been immunized, because we still don't know whether you could be infectious to another individual. But realistically, what these vaccines do, and what you're going to hear a lot about is, oh my gosh, well, the J&J, vaccine is not as successful. It's only 66% effective at preventing mild or moderate disease. But the bottom line is there were no cases of hospitalizations and death with the J&J vaccine. And you need to compare to the fact that they have been doing their studies when these new covariants that I will be talking about have been out and about and definitely affecting the reaction and the ability for someone to end up getting an infection, versus these other vaccines were studied way back in December and came out with their data before we had these other covariants that were circulating around. Next slide, please. So I just want to take a minute. I know that you'll find some of these myths to be actually unbelievable, but they're truly misinformation that are going around surrounding this vaccine that I want to kind of clear up. Vaccine cannot give you COVID. The mRNA vaccines don't even have the COVID virus in them. And the other vaccines are killed vaccines. So there is nothing live that's going into your body. There is no microchip in this vaccine. I know that seems silly that I have to say that, but I've had some very real concerned people reach out to me verbally on phone calls and also in emails. And so I want to assure people I have absolutely no desire to microchip anybody in the state of Indiana or in the United States. The vaccine will not make you sterile. This is a favorite one of all of our anti-vax individuals out there. And this vaccine is very similar to other vaccines that have been out there and have been shown over and over again, like the HPV vaccine, not to cause any issues with fertility in women or men going forward. And the vaccine doesn't alter your DNA, as I already mentioned. Honestly, this doesn't even go into the nucleus of your cell, so it can't get to the DNA. Next slide, please. I knew that if we were blessed enough to get a vaccine early on, that those doses would be very, very limited to begin with. And when you have a potentially life-saving therapeutic or vaccine, you really have to be careful about how you roll that vaccine out so that morally and ethically you are allocating that appropriately. Just so you do not think that just myself or Dr. Weaver, who is my chief medical officer, are making these decisions in conjunction with the governor, we actually engaged an external advisory committee that had clergy, that has ethicists, that has immunologists and vaccinologists and infectious disease experts and local health department leaders and minority leaders from all across the state to help look at the data. And number one, to make sure that yes, this vaccine's appropriate, it's successful, it's efficacious, it's safe, and it's appropriate for this certain population for the state of Indiana. And also looked at all the data with regards to who should this be rolled out to ethically and morally first. Our priorities were, as with every other state, to reinforce our healthcare infrastructure, not just so that we had individuals here that could take care of COVID-19 patients, but in case you ended up with an appendicitis or you ended up needing cancer surgery or something else, the healthcare system was there for you with a room, with a bed, with the ability to have staff and specialists that need to take care of you. And then to make sure that we decrease disease as much as possible. So we started with healthcare workers, first responders, long-term care residents, who about 50% of our deaths have occurred in long-term care, unfortunately. In fact, a COVID-19 outbreak in a long-term care facility, if a patient becomes positive, just because they're frequently very fragile, very, very weaker individuals, the mortality rate's like 20%. So that was the right place to start for sure, and the long-term care staff. And that was our phase 1A. As we got through 1A, 1B always has been that we were going to focus on individuals that were the most vulnerable, that they had the highest risk from having severe disease, hospitalization, and death from this. And when we looked at this, we found that if we did this in an age-based fashion, when we get down to 60, we would have accounted for 93% of our deaths and 64% of our hospitalizations. And as we go forward, when in fact we then reach out to further high-risk groups like individuals with solid organ transplant and renal dialysis, Down syndrome, sickle cell disease, and certain cancers that are actively being treated with chemotherapy now or in the past 3 months. Those individuals are the highest risk, and that's why the state of Indiana is prioritizing them. In fact, when we get down to the age of 50, we will have accounted for individuals that have 80% of individuals that have comorbidities. So the heart disease, the stroke, the diabetes, the morbid obesity, etc. I also want to mention that we partnered with CVS and Walgreens in the federal program, and that's how we got vaccine quickly to our long-term care facilities, our assisted livings, our senior living housing, all of the individual places where our older population lives in a congregate setting and are at higher risk. Right now, we have rolled this out to anybody who is 65 and above. We're not going down any further this week, but I'm hoping that next week you will see us go down to the age of 60, and we are working to start in immunizing people like with renal dialysis and other individuals. Next slide, please. So we have 290 different sites right now for the vaccine across the state. Our hospitals were the first to step up, and I really want to give kudos to our hospitals, because I get on a regular call once or twice a week with the other state health officers, not only across the United States, but within District 5, which is here in the Midwest. And when they ask me, how do you have that many sites? How have you gotten this much vaccine out? What I have heard back and what I've told them is, well, our hospitals do it. Well, our local health departments do it. And they're like, well, how did you get them to engage? Did the governor have to do an emergency order? Did you, incentivize them financially in some ways or threaten them that if they didn't do it? And I'm like, absolutely not. We just asked them. And in Indiana, like as usual, everybody stepped up to the plate. So we have our 92 different local health departments across the state doing this. We have our hospitals, retail pharmacies, our federally qualified health clinics and community health clinics that we engaged 44 of them about 4 weeks ago, because we knew that many of them are located in areas where many of our people in the lowest socioeconomic groups in the state and many of our minority populations are actually located. And we know that that's an easy place for them to get their vaccine. And we said, we want to give you vaccine, but we don't want to give it just for the population that you serve in your clinics. We want you to open it up to your whole community. And that's exactly what they've done. More than 60% of our 60+ population has signed up for the vaccine and are getting vaccinated, and that's huge. I think that we'll probably see that land somewhere between 65 to 70, maybe even as high as 80%. We are truly still in a battle of supply and demand. The CDC has sent out just over 1 million doses to the state of Indiana. And if I look at right now, based on yesterday's figures, we have administered 759,992 first doses and fully vaccinated about 280,000 people. So you can see that we're running it very close. We get vaccine, we get it out. We get vaccine, we get it out. And the purpose of that is to make sure that we are getting it into individuals' arms as quickly as we can. And we have 1.5 million appointments scheduled from the very beginning until the end of February. We only receive about 100,000 doses a week. And that is going to be where our consistent amount. Before this, it was even as low as 80,000. So you can see that that doesn't go a long way when we're talking about, if I open it up to critical infrastructure, teachers and people who are bus drivers and work in Walmart, that's over 2 million people right there, or to everybody who is 60 and above with comorbidities, 2.1 million people. And we just don't have enough doses to open it that broadly right now. Next slide, please. Despite the demand, there's still been a lot of vaccine hesitancy in our minority and our immigrant communities. And much of this is built on, I think, a very real historical distrust from things like the Tuskegee experiments, where we withheld syphilis treatments for African-American males because we were studying the results in them. Other causes in general, just a distrust of government for many of our individual racial minorities and ethnic groups. And then the myths about the disease tend to really be big in a lot of our smaller minority populations. So we really know this is a big hurdle to overcome, and we're working to address these concerns on a number of public awareness campaigns. We started with a broad campaign of It's Our Shot, Hoosiers, and then basically are engaging our communities of colors to share individuals who have gotten the vaccine, trusted individuals, whether that's clergy or local health officers or a general surgeon, just someone within the community that is trusted. Maybe somebody who runs the local Latino community center, and getting them to share their reasons for why they got vaccinated, what their experience was with it, did they have any complications, and then making sure that we have these spots done in multiple languages. So you'll see those coming out very soon, and they'll be tailored to areas where we know the populations we're trying to reach will be listening and viewing. We've also been partnering with our minority stakeholders around the state to try to identify additional ways to reach these vulnerable populations, such as ads and publications in Black barbershops, making sure that we put billboards in the Amish community areas, making sure that we have engaged pharmacies like one up in Topeka, Indiana, where we know our Amish population frequently goes, and working with our local health departments that are used to working, for instance, with their Bermuse community in Allen County or here in Marion County. And we just continue to adapt as things change and move on, and are appreciative of the partnerships. Our goal now is to try to identify community leaders within every single county that, as I mentioned, may be associated with the Latino Community Center, may be associated with an African-American church, may be associated with the Burmese group or community church, and making sure that we educate those individuals about the efficacy and the safety of the vaccine in their population so that they can share that information. Next slide, please. I do want to say that COVID is determined to keep us on our toes. We are also facing mutations of the virus, which is typical of a virus. Anybody that works with viruses know that many of them mutate, and the more replications, the more disease you have, the more replications you have, and the more chance there is for these mutations to occur. The B.1.1.7 or the UK covariant was one of the very first ones recognized back in September. And this is probably why the UK has seen the huge surge that they saw there at the end of 2020 and had so many hospitalizations. We already have 34 states here in the United States that have identified this B.1.1.7 variant, and we've had at least 12 cases here in the state of Indiana. We believe by the end of March, this will probably be the #1 strain in the United States. And that is going to overtake what we call the wild strain, which is the original strain that we've been dealing with. We know that this particular variant changes the spike protein and makes it about 1.5 times more transmissible. It's still not clear about whether this causes more severe disease. We know that by having more people sick, you will get more people in the hospital and you will have more deaths. Is the increased death that they're seeing in the UK related to just the sheer numbers, or are they actually seeing case by case that this is more severe disease and people are more likely to die? And that is really what is being actually sorted out right now in literature and research ongoing. We also have the South African variant, the 1351 variant, which has been found in South Carolina and at least about 4 or 5 other states here in the United States. Again, it changes the spike protein, and that makes it much more transmissible. To date, no evidence that it causes it to be more severe in individuals. And the P1 variant, which is from Brazil. Those are the big ones that we're looking for and testing for now. Indiana does do genomic testing and sequencing on its own. We have sent some to the CDC at their request, but we will be doing that in our own public health lab here. Lilly, Purdue, and a couple of other labs are doing it. Next slide, please. So messaging with this virus has been difficult for the entire process of this pandemic. You know, we first came out and quite honestly, we were like, we're not sure if masks help or not, and we can't have you buying up all the surgical masks because our healthcare professionals need these masks. So if you wear masks, that's great. We think it's a good idea, but they should be cloth-made masks and homemade masks. And you couldn't go online at that time, if you remember, and buy masks that were surgical masks. Certainly the cloth ones were not as prevalent as they are now. That has totally changed around. We know absolutely from studies now that at least a 2-layer mask, whether it's cloth or a surgical mask, does dramatically decrease the spread or the risk of you getting infection. And so that's why we want everybody masked and socially distanced to the best of their ability. We also, you know, as I mentioned, had difficulty getting PPE, personal protective equipment. So Indiana actually started making the personal protective equipment, which we just decided we can't rely on other places for this. There was one national strategic stockpile, and it was never designed to outfit every state in the entire country at the same time. We also knew that basically we were very busy and didn't have time to keep up with the tremendous amount of literature that was coming out on the hourly basis. So we tapped into what is called WISE, which is actually a state private relationship with the state of Indiana government, along with IU's Research Center, and they actually were incredible. Anytime we threw a particular question or concern at them, they got back to us within hours or the next day with information. Oftentimes they were taking the ongoing data and the ongoing research or things coming out from the CDC and compiling that and putting that together with regards to a particular question or concern that we had. So it was very, very helpful, and it's an ongoing thing that we continue to use. We tapped into Fairbanks because there was a big question early on through the CDC about whether if I could be asymptomatically infected with COVID-19. We knew from very early on from some of our early contact tracing that yes, there were people that were totally asymptomatic and were at a wedding on a particular Saturday and didn't develop symptoms till Monday, but infected X number of people at the wedding. But CDC didn't have the data for that. In the state of Indiana, we partnered with the Fairbanks School of Public Health and did an actual prevalence study. And what we found is that at the time of testing, just routine individuals that we found through the BMV or that we did based on their tax returns and invited them to come and get tested, of those that were testing positive, 45% of them reported no symptoms at the time that they were tested. So that pretty much put to rest whether there could be asymptomatic individuals out there and asymptomatic spread. Now, some of them may have been pre-symptomatic, meaning the day we actually tested them, they may have been asymptomatic, but in the next 24 to 48 hours, they might very well have developed symptoms. Next slide, please. We had to really partner with our partners out there across the state to make sure everybody stayed on the same page throughout this. So we had twice-a-week webinars and sometimes just once-a-week webinars, not only with healthcare providers where we actually brought experts from infectious disease and experts from vaccinology and other people in to talk to our healthcare providers across the state, where we disseminated information that we got from our WISE partnership with the research individuals at IU Research Institute. We did weekly webinars. It started twice a week webinars with our local health departments, our schools, and then our hospitals to just keep everybody up to date. Early on, many of those calls with hospitals were like bringing hospitals together in a region. Do you have enough ICU beds? Do you have the ability to be able to actually take care of a patient and ventilate them? Do you need ventilators? We had a system here that we had just implemented where we actually could have hospitals, long-term care facilities, and local health departments report daily on their PPE supply, report daily on their ICU beds, their hospital admissions, whether they needed testing supplies. And that was really critical as we ran things for the state. Local health departments had to step up and partner to give out PPE to a lot of people to start developing testing sites. And we have, I think, 94 local health department testing sites in addition to our Optum testing sites across the state. We worked with our minority stakeholders too, and our minority leaders across the state to make sure that we put some of our Optum testing sites and other sites in areas where we knew it would be easily accessible, where individuals that may be undocumented would feel comfortable to come and get a test done, and know that was totally confidential. We did a lot of cross-agency collaborations, which are ongoing, you know, with our EMS, the Department of Homeland Security, Dr. Kaufman, with FSSA, Dr. Sullivan, who I've mentioned. You know, we worked with 211, with AAA, which is their area agencies on aging, and with AARP in our libraries. So when we started rolling this out to 80 and above, and 75 and above, and 70 above, we knew many of those individuals would not either have computer access or an email address, or they may not have a smartphone. So we actually reached out to these populations and offered to sign them up, and allowed them to call into 211 to not only get information about the vaccine, but actually to get help. Oh, did my video go out? I'm so sorry. That's me, you guys, technology. And then also to make sure that these individuals had transportation to get there, to get their vaccine. And we've worked with our Guard across the state. They have been support not only for testing, but support for our long-term care facilities, for distribution of personal protective equipment. Pretty much anything we've asked them to do, they have been absolutely incredible. And that partnership has been absolutely imperative for what we've done. Almost done here, guys. Next slide. So I just want to give you a glimpse into what the new normal is going to look like. Everybody's like, when do I get to take my mask off? Realistically, I see us wearing these masks through the fall. These new vaccines are going to be dented by the new strains or variants that we have out there of this virus that may not be as effectively stopped. We may need to give additional boosters. This may be a yearly thing like we do with influenza on a regular basis. And so we need to continue to wear our masks to not only protect ourselves, but to protect others, especially high-risk people, until we know we have that herd immunity up to that at least 75%, and maybe, as Fauci says, maybe more like 85%. So that there's not much disease out there circulating, and then we'll be able to take our masks off. I think it's also important to continue to follow the variants, what variants are out there, and how susceptible are our therapeutics like our monoclonal antibodies and our vaccines to that. And we do know that there's going to be about 5% of people that will not actually be responders to these vaccines. And that's why it's so critical that we get herd immunity up there before people are allowed to take their vaccines off or their masks off. And traditionally, I'll be very honest with you, it's individuals like our elderly population where their immune systems don't work as well. And unfortunately, they may not respond quite as well or get that 94 to 95% efficacy. Next slide, and pretty much the last slide. So all I would say is that whatever job, whatever position you're in, whatever you get asked to do, always try to expect the unexpected. Be ready to pivot. Step outside your comfort zone. You never know what is planned for you and where you may end up. Understand that leadership isn't always about you being the expert at the table every time, but it's you convening the experts and leading the experts for the good of everyone rowing in the same direction and accomplishing the same things. And I think never be afraid to disagree, never be afraid to question, and never be afraid to say, I don't know the answer to this, but I'll get back with you. I will let you know that. After having done, I don't know, almost 100 press conferences now with the governor, that's certainly one that I've had to use. And then I think no matter what you're facing, no matter what the particular pandemic problem upheaval is for the moment, give yourself and others grace. I think that's the only way we survive these times. And I think that's a really important message. Next slide. So really 2020 was definitely one for the record books. 2020 is, stacking up to be similar, but I'm really, really hoping and praying that these vaccines are going to make such a big difference in the amount of cases that we have and the amount of disease that we have, that we're going to truly see our deaths go down too. Happy to answer any questions you guys might have.
Thank you so much, Dr. Box. This was awesome and really great information. And I was taking notes. And I think this is going to be dinner conversation. Of course, COVID's been a feature
for a while.
Dinner conversations for a while, but this was excellent. So we want to start, our conversation now, and we are going to try to get to as many questions as we can. If we don't, then we will try to post those and answer those in our Grown from STEM initiative, or also on the website. But always go to, I believe it's ourshot.in.gov to get more information. Let that be your source. Type it in right now. Just type it in on your phone, on your iPad, on your Samsung, on your laptop, and bookmark it so you can go there for information. And
just along that line, Linda, I'm going to say that those frequently asked questions that are on that website, we update those every 24 hours with WISE, with that research team that I was talking about, because things change so much and it became somewhat overwhelming for us to do it on our own. So basically we work with them to update that, and then we tweak that to make it fit for our particular website. So thanks for mentioning it.
Excellent. And so make sure now for sure, make sure and bookmark that. And if there's a button that says subscribe to alerts, then hit that button too, but let that be your source. So I'm going to kick it off with a question. And, we've seen, and I've seen on CNN and MSNBC and even on WTHR, all the maps. And so are there specific areas of the state or city that are worse than others? And why is that?
Well, as far as cases, that varies. We've seen that go up and down. We definitely do have some counties and some areas of the state that are not as engaged with the mitigation procedures and have a different impression. I live in Marion County, and so I live and work in the urban area. So I'm used to seeing people with masks on. If you travel out to our more rural areas, specifically if you stop at gas stations or little mini mart type areas, you may find many people that are not masked, despite the fact that the sign on their door says they should have a mask. So certainly we do see higher cases there. We see higher cases in areas where people do not have access to care, or they're not connected to that care, right? The care may be there, but they're just not connected the way they could or should be. And so we really try to actually set up our mobile units right in those areas. We have 10 mobile vans, one in each of the preparedness districts of the state. And what we tend to do is go to the area that is next to, maybe in the strip mall where the Latino Community Center is, or to the area where we know the larger African-American churches. In fact, we have worked with a lot of our pastors across the state to try to set up mobile units right in those areas for testing, and are doing the same with vaccinations.
Excellent. Thank you, Dr. Box. And Angela, I think you have a question.
Yes, ma'am. So thank you so much, Dr. Box. That was so informative. And you touched on so many of the things that Linda and I had chatted about and hope we kind of pulled out of this presentation. So thank you for that. I want to touch back on masks. You basically said that you might as well get comfortable because we're going to be in masks for a while. But I know that recently I'm seeing people that are double masking. You mentioned that originally there was concern about the public going out and buying up all the medical masks. So the health community was really encouraging the public to, go buy cloth masks. But is that the status quo now? What kind of mask should we be buying? Should we be double masked? Again, reiterate exactly who is masking, protecting, because we're still seeing a lot of folks that aren't necessarily doing it right, or to your point, even masking at all.
Right. So I think the key about your mask is, does it fit tightly across your nose? So if it has one of those little metal things in it that you can crimp down to your nose and fit here, I know when I was even in surgery, they make them that have an adhesive here that goes under, which I don't recommend because you'll get a peel every time you take that off your face. But then you also want it to fit over here. And I have a fuller face, kind of broader cheeks. So I never have problems with that. But a lot of people see a gap right here. So that's why they sometimes will take one of the surgical masks and put that underneath their cloth mask and wear them double. I would say when you might want a double mask is when you're going to see grandma, right? Or you're going to be around someone that's, particularly at high risk. I think if you're out walking on the streets, your single double layer mask is fine, but that mask is not only protecting you, but it really is helping to protect other individuals around you. And when we take our mask off in church, even if we're socially distanced and we sing, you need to be greater than 6 feet, because we know that screaming and yelling at a ball game or singing in a church, those are great things to do and great outlets, but that just makes us project even further those things coming out of our lungs that could infect another individual.
Yeah. Thank you for that.
And on that, and I'm so glad you brought that up, Dr. Box, as far as the singing and the yelling. And so, we see, and I've seen this on Facebook and on LinkedIn of the selfie, the arm linking, and people have masks on, but they're right next to each other. And so, and I've seen lots of those pictures. And then I actually have some people that I know that said, well, I was wearing a mask, but so, I'm okay. So can you help us understand how effective masking alone is versus masking and social distancing?
Yeah. So, I think this is really interesting because one thing that I've done recently with the schools is I've said for many schools, it was hard to get that full 6 feet, right, between desks in the classroom and to be able to have kids. And we really know 100% is better for kids to be in the classroom, socially, emotionally, from an educational standpoint, it's better. But they couldn't get that full 6 feet, but many of them were getting well over 3 foot, 4 foot, something like that. And we just weren't seeing kids and teachers getting infected in the classrooms. We looked at our data. They're getting infected in extracurricular activities, in the teacher's lounge, at lunch, when they're doing their athletics. And so really, we have said that if the infection is in the classroom and everybody's masked and at least 3 foot apart, you don't need to quarantine individuals, right? So what I say to people is, it's fine to be standing around on a corner talking with someone, especially if you're outside, if you're masked. I think it's when you get in a closed-in area and you're having that cocktail party or in a bar, that's the other big one. We're all standing very close together. It's loud, so we're trying to project our voice. That's when I worry about the masking not being quite enough. And then where we take our masks off, right? We take our masks off when we go to eat, right? And so consequently, restaurants can be very, very safe as long as we are kind of socially distanced table-wise, and we're sitting with people that we regularly take our masks off with, right? This is kind of our bubble. These are the people that I'm out with. Otherwise, you could be taking a chance that you could be infected if you're going out with your best friend and their husband or partner.
That's excellent. And I hope, I think I feel a little pedantic sometimes when I went in someplace at the grocery store and somebody looked at me because I was like, oh no, you're not on the mark. I have my mask on, get on that mark now. So, we've heard, Dr. Box, a lot of different things, and, this is science. So we change and we morph, right? And we answer. But we've heard the quarantine time after exposure has shifted from 14 days and it's 10 days. And recently I heard it's 5 to 7 days. So can you refresh our memory as
Right.
to what the CDC or in the health department deems as acceptable quarantine time as of right now.
Right. So technically, the safest quarantine is a 14-day quarantine, because the chance of a post-quarantine infection, meaning after that 14 days for an individual that was a close contact or was exposed, is less than 0.1%. So that really is very, very reassuring. If you look at a 10-day quarantine, of course, from the very beginning, the CDC's been trying to say, how can we slim this down? How can we keep kids in school longer? How can we get them back sooner? How can we get employees back sooner? Specifically with our healthcare, right? You got healthcare professionals getting exposed all the time and sending them home for 14 days. You can't run your hospital sometime, to be honest with you. So quite honestly, if you get down to 10 days, that post-quarantine, if you go back on day 11, your post-quarantine risk of getting infected is less than, at that point, 1.4%. So if you go back early, if you go back on day 11, you have to be absolutely fastidious about wearing your mask, washing your hands, staying socially distanced from people. You don't go into the lunchroom and eat with everybody with your mask off. You go back to your own private office. Make sure that you're ultra careful till you get to that 14th and 15th day to make sure you're not going to be symptomatic. And then the 7 days is really, you can return on the 8th day if you get tested on 5, 6, or 7, and you test negative. All of these only work if you remain asymptomatic. If at any time during this process, you were a close contact and you got symptomatic, you automatically are on 10 days of isolation. Even if you are only symptomatic for 1 day or 2 days, you are 10 days before you can return, because you could still be shedding that virus. So the 7 days, we recently started offering that option to our schools because we've seen our percent positivity go down in the state, because we do want to get kids back into schools sooner. We want teachers to be able to be back in schools. And we are now providing them with what we call the BioNex Now cards, which are a quick antigen test that can be done in school, so that those children that are more disadvantaged, whose mom and dad had to be driving that bus that morning and isn't going to be home to take them to the doctor, or doesn't have easy access to that testing, they have that testing there in the school, not only for a symptomatic child or teacher, but also potentially to test that child back in on day 8.
And so in talking about that, that leads me to my next question, which is, what is, and talking about the 10 days, and what's a COVID long hauler? When I first heard that, I was like, I automatically thought of, oh my gosh, truck drivers get, it's just, what's a COVID-19 long hauler? And are there any documented cases of long haulers in Indiana?
So here's what I'm going to say to you. First of all, an individual that is hospitalized and pretty severely ill needs to probably quarantine for a full 21 days, or isolate for a full 21 days is the appropriate word, because they're going to shed the virus longer. We have known that when we very first at the beginning of this pandemic, in order for a healthcare worker who had been positive with COVID to come back to work, they had to supposedly test negative. Many hospitals wanted them to test negative. What we found is that people were testing positive long after their symptoms were gone. I mean, I'm talking 60 days, even longer sometimes, when we just tested the nasopharynx. Now, in all fairness, there have been studies done since that time that have shown that that virus is not actively replicating. So it's not going to infect anybody, right? If that's basically dead virus that we're picking up on that PCR test, that's not going to infect anybody. You're not still infected. But that's kind of what they've referred to with regards to long hauler, meaning that they may carry that virus remnant in their nasopharyngeal area for a long time, but truly not be infecting people.
That's very interesting, Dr. Box. We've talked about the variants. I heard the other day, and this is kind of my wheelhouse. I'm very familiar with genetic variants and mutations. And you mentioned the UK strain, the Brazil strain, the South American strain, or South African, I'm sorry, strain. And one of the questions from the Q&A is how do they get their names? This B117 and how do they get that name?
And again, this is not my area of expertise, so correct me, Angela, if I'm wrong, but I think it usually has to do with where the actual mutation occurs and how many, like some strains will have many, many mutations and changes. Others will just have a few in a few key areas. So that's usually what it means, something more to a geneticist who's actually looking at these genomic changes.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Usually those names are the number is the genetic location, and oftentimes it's the protein change. So from a valine to a leucine or whatever that may be. You talked a lot about the variants, so I'm not going to talk too much about those. And you made clear that, you know, you do have concern that part of our mask wearing will be related to the fact that these strains are still getting more common in the population, and the vaccine may not necessarily be protective against all of those. So when we're considering investigating the genetics, you haven't even talked about Indiana is doing some sequencing, that Purdue and Lilly was actually helping with some of that work, and that the UK variant has been identified here. But what is the hypothesis around why this virus is mutating so quickly? And do we expect that by the end of even 2021, we now know 3? Is it possible that there will be 7 or 8 or 9 variants that we are potentially vaccinating from or having a booster shot?
Yeah, there are many, many more variants than those 3. Those are the variants that are becoming dominant. And as you know, it's kind of survival of the fittest. The most fit virus that can replicate most quickly, that can infect people's cells most quickly, is going to be the one that's going to rise to the top of infecting the most individuals. So the ones we talk about are, they call them VOCs, so variants of concern. The ones that we know are emerging as being dominant viruses that are, you know, so much more quickly transmissible and potentially could have increased consequences as far as severe consequences or death. I do want to point out that all of the vaccines, and Fauci said this the other day, and I thought it was really good. All 4 of the vaccines, these covariants, these variants of concern, are putting a dent in all of our vaccines, meaning the efficacy is probably not going to be as good. But all 4 of them are still protective against that very severe disease that puts us in the hospital and causes death. And that's the important thing, right? If this eventually becomes the common cold or becomes even influenza, although unfortunately influenza does take a number of people's lives. The interesting thing about influenza in the United States is, or in the US, we normally have about 65,000 cases a year. 2020 has had so far 1,003 cases. And that's because, guess what? More of us got vaccinated, we're socially distancing, and we're wearing our masks. So it shows that some of our Asian compatriots that have been masking during these times may have the right idea during certain times of the year when these things are more transmissible.
Absolutely. Linda, I think you're up next.
So we have a question. I wanted to cover a question in the chat. And one was, so if grandparents receive, since we're talking about the vaccine, so if grandparents receive the vaccine, but the kiddos and the grandkiddos are still waiting to receive theirs, should everyone still wear a mask, or just when you're together, or just the ones that are unvaccinated?
Yeah. So here's what I would say. Number one, there'll be about 5% of the population that will be non-responders to the vaccine. They won't develop an immunologic response, and we unfortunately don't know who those people are oftentimes. Our elderly population oftentimes does not get the same immune system reaction, that same overwhelming good immune system reaction that our younger population does. So I still want our older population to be careful. By that, do I mean don't visit with your grandchildren, don't hug them? I would say no, but let's do this. Let's put a mask on them and a mask on you. Let's have a hug, go wash our hands, and then let's socially distance, right? I mean, I got my COVID vaccine from my grandson, who cannot see me without giving me a big old kiss on the lips, right? And that was my bubble. He was in my bubble. I knew he went to daycare. I might get it, but I thought, I'm willing to take this chance because honestly, that's my mental health, right? Seeing my kids, seeing my grandson, that's the way I kind of have been getting through this. So he was part of my bubble. But if you're particularly at risk, like I'm 63, if I was particularly at risk with a lot of underlying health conditions, I would have had to rethink that issue. And so I think this is an individual process for everyone. I do think our elderly population needs to be seeing their family again. You know, they've gone too long. So the ability to be able to be together, even if you're at risk, if you are masked in the same room, watch an IU basketball game together, watch the NCAAs, whatever it is you're doing that you enjoy doing as a family, do it. If you're going to have a meal together, you know, maybe grandma and grandpa eat in the dining room and the rest of you, the little kids, all eat in the kitchen, whatever that is. You can still eat, but maybe you separate then because you're taking your mask off. There's still a reason to be careful until we can get those younger kids and those young adults vaccinated because their immune system's good and they're probably going to respond well to it.
Yeah, let me just jump in here real quick, Linda. What do we know at this point about kids and the vaccination? Have there been any studies of the vaccine in youth to date?
So Pfizer is good and has been studied down to the age of 16. So if you call it, to me, a 16-year-old's a kid, but a 30-year-old's a kid to me these days. So honestly, down to 16, we're sure. They are just now starting to do down to the age of 12. So we don't know a whole lot about young kids yet, except that what we know is that their immune system works well enough that not very many of them get very seriously ill unless they have significant underlying comorbidities or issues, usually.
Dr. Box, you know, I'm going to cover another question that came into the chat. And I think all of us in this audience want to know this because you have a large group of people who travel. Is it safe to fly? I mean, so, you know, is it safe to fly and should we fly? And what are the rules about flying?
Yeah. So here's what I'm going to say to you. Yes, it is. Actually, early on, the planes were actually contact tracing everyone. And if you were in, they knew what rows everybody was in. And basically at that point in time, they would reach out. And what we found is if everybody was fastidious and wore their masks, just like in the classroom, it was highly unlikely they were going to get infected. Now, if you're going to fly, take some wipes with you, you know, some Clorox wipes, wipe down the tray table, wipe down your chair. I would say maybe don't eat or drink unless you're like on that 14-hour flight where you don't really have any choice. And be careful in the airport. That's probably the more likely place for you to get it than actually sitting on that airplane. But yeah, I mean, my husband and I are planning a trip later in March to go for a few days. And we'll fly and, you know, provided it's good. Now, what I want to say to it, look where you're flying. Because if you get sick where you're flying, you're not going to be able to fly back. Because if they know you're positive, you're not getting on the airplane, right? You're not going to get back here. So make sure that where you're flying, number one, accepts Americans. And number two, do you have to have a negative test to get in? And number three, what happens? Are you going to be okay if you get stuck in Canada or Ireland or UK or, you know, even in Florida, right? Trying to get home.
And I'll just ask a quick follow-up on that. So where do people get information about whether they're going to have a test or, you know, are they going to take your temperature as you're going through TSA? So you're taking off your belt and your shoes and then all of a sudden somebody's pointing a, you know, a thermometer at your head. So where do people get information about that?
So, you know, in the United States right now, for the most part, they're not doing temperature checks because that just bunches everybody up together even more. And you know, unless somebody appears infected, there are some places that have machines that you walk through that's supposed to read what your body temperature is to tell whether you light up that particular machine. That's had plus or minus good results. And I don't know that many airports are doing that. But I will tell you that many countries have very specific entry recommendations. Either they won't let you in if you're coming from a certain area, or if you do come from a certain, and you have to think about coming back too, because the United States has some limitations. So if you go online and you look at, oh gosh, what is the website? If you look at the federal government's website for travel, it will give you information about that. Just like if you were going to go to Haiti or Bolivia, it will tell you what immunizations you have to have. It will tell you about travel to that country, what they're requiring for entry and what you would have to have coming back from that country. And I'm blanking on the website, to be honest with you, but
It'll come back to you. It always comes back around. So Dr. Box, you mentioned the Tuskegee experiments. You know, it is Black History Month, and the Tuskegee experiments are absolutely a real part of American history and Black history, and unquestionably affects how African Americans and Black communities and communities of color relate and trust the healthcare system. And now we have like a full-fledged modern day version of, you know, a vaccine rollout that certainly has provided diverse communities some pause, even with respect to some may be familiar with the medical impropriety around the Henrietta Lacks story. So people of color certainly have their issues, but we're finding that even with this COVID-19 vaccine rollout, this kind of vaccine hesitancy is going well beyond communities of color, right? There are a lot of people, and quite frankly, it's just not about necessarily education. I mean, I've personally spoken with plenty of well-educated people who still are absolutely not convinced that COVID is real, sadly, or certainly that the vaccine is efficacious and safe and all those things. So what do you've given us a lot of information today, but when you're out, you know, in the grocery store, talking to everyday, common day, you know, folks, what do you tell them to reassure them about the safety? And I know for me, my mother and I have had these conversations. She's on the phone today, so hey, Mom. But you know, she's been in her COVID haven for sure for all of 2020. She just got her first dose of the vaccine, but she and I talked long and hard about, Angela, do you think it's safe? Do you think we should do it? And we quickly went from, I don't know, to, you know what, you better get it when you have the opportunity to get it. And they just did. But what do you tell people, you know, who are having those same concerns and conversations around the dinner table about whether mom should get it or grandpa should get it or aunt, uncle, et cetera?
Right. So there's a lot of vaccine hesitancy, and a lot of people have said, you know, about a third of people say, I'm not getting it no matter what. Forget it. I'm not doing it. It doesn't matter how long it's out there. I'm not doing it. And then we have another third that are like, I just kind of want to watch a little bit and see how everybody else does, right? If they don't grow an extra eye or they don't drop dead, then maybe I'll consider it. And there's a third, or, you know, even 40% or so that are like, bring it on. I cannot wait to get it, right? And that's what we're really experiencing right now, especially with our elderly people, because they know their risk is so high. But really what I try to tell people is, hey, I understand your concern. This is very real. This is very, very new. We've never been through anything like this in the history of our world, right? This type of a pandemic in our living time. And so what I try to reassure them is that even though we call it Operation Warp Speed, these vaccines had been being developed, and we've been studying these particular viruses, just not the SARS-CoV-2, because that is a little bit different, for over 10 years. And so really we're building on research that has been there for a long time. It's just before financially, it didn't pay these companies to put the additional effort and money in to get them fixed, right? To get a good vaccine. So the Operation Warp Speed, I tell them, was all about actually producing the vaccine, hoping and praying that that vaccine was going to get an emergency use authorization and was going to show good efficacy and safety. And if it didn't, that was all going to get thrown down the sink or get thrown away. I also tell them it's been studied in populations. You can go on the website at the FDA. You can look at the EUA for each one of these vaccines. You can see what percentage of the population was African American that was studied, what percentage of the population was in your age range, what percentage of your population was in the particular ethnicity. And so that gives people some reassurance too. Then I talk to them about people in my life that have gotten it. Oh, my husband was actually in one of the studies. He got, 2 doses of the vaccine. Basically my mother-in-law got it. I was happy to have her get it. I've gotten the vaccine because I'm out giving vaccine to people, right? So I tell them, this is the reassurance that you have, that I think it's the people that I love the most in the world, right? That I'm closest to. I would not give them something or encourage them to do something if I didn't think it was safe. And then put them in contact with people that have had the vaccine so that they can hear, yeah, my arm was really sore for a couple of days, or, I had a little bit of headachiness or achiness, but it was no big deal. Within 24 to 36 hours, I was totally good. Now, maybe I felt a little bit worse with my second shot, but again, that all passed within 24 hours. So those are the kinds of things that I try to do to give people reassurance. And I try to respect them as individuals and their decision-making, right? As hard as it is for me, having seen so much of these horrible deaths and everything, I know people have a right to make a decision for their own body and their own lives. I just hope people make the decision to do this, especially our younger, healthier people that will get a good immune response, so that we can protect those people that can't get the vaccine, because there are individuals out there that cannot.
Thank you. That's it. And that led me to my next question, and you answered it. So I do want to make sure that we cover a couple of questions in the chat. So one question was, we have first responders, frontline workers on this call. So what are your words of advice and encouragement to them? Because we actually have some students on the line that are just entering the space, and so what are some words that you would share with these folks on the front lines and just going to the front lines?
Yeah, hopefully I won't get too emotional. We ask our nurses, our EMS, our respiratory therapists, our individuals that clean hospital ICU rooms to go into battle every single day, long before we knew exactly how this virus was spread, exactly how transmissible it was, whether any of our therapeutics that were trying to be developed would work, what exactly the comorbidities were that were at risk, highest risk for this. And they did it every day. And they did it in overtime, and they didn't take days off. I remember there was a nurse in Northern Indiana that died on her way home. She fell asleep at the wheel and was in a motor vehicle accident. So to me, that's a COVID death, right? That's something that was related to this pandemic. So never before in my life have I seen healthcare professionals and frontline workers and law enforcement and other people step up the way they have, and it had to have been scary for them too. So I have great appreciation for who they are and what they do. It is a most honorable and incredible profession. But I do want to remember those individuals that also stocked my grocery stores and, kept my lights on and kept my heat going, because they also went to work every day. They also were critical infrastructure people. And we weren't always out there clapping for them, right? We weren't always there cheering them on and saying, good job, and thank you for heating my house, or thank you for, filling my grocery stores. So I want to recognize that a lot of people have stepped up. And in Indiana, like so many areas, so many of our sites for vaccine and even for registration for testing are staffed by volunteers. We had overwhelming response from healthcare providers, from housewives, from individuals that had done all different things in their life, step up and volunteer and say, this is where I live, this is what time I can give, and this is how I can help. And we've paired them with our long-term care facilities and our hospitals and our testing sites and our local health departments. And people across Indiana have just stepped up. And that's why Indiana, and you guys right now, you can't believe the maps that are out there, because our data on immunization, for some reason, is not transferring to the CDC through the Tiberius link, which it's supposed to transfer. So Indiana right now, whereas we've been #1 and leading vaccine in the United States, looks like we're doing really poorly, but I can tell you we've got a data transfer issue. But what I'm going to say is we've been setting the bar for the United States with regards to this vaccine. And that is because of the support and the volunteer and how everybody has stepped up.
Thank you, Dr. Box. And I'll say this too. So for those of us, when we're ordering our groceries online and using DoorDash and Grubhub and Uber Eats and all, and you eat and I'm eating, and we'll all eat apps, make sure and up that tip. It defaults to something, go ahead and put in a custom tip. Dr. Box, first, I want to thank you, but there's one last question that I want to put out there if we can answer it quickly. And that is, Do you think we're all going to be vaccinated by the end of 2021?
Yes, I believe we're going to have enough vaccine, short of some, major disaster that occurs. I think we're going to have enough vaccine to get everybody done by the end of 2021. I'm really hoping that happens in the summer. Now, whether there's a booster that comes along with certain things, like Johnson & Johnson is working on, hey, can we get even a better response if we do a second dose or a booster at a later time? They're actually studying that and researching that. Moderna is studying whether they can go down in the amount that they have in their vaccine, which is about 3 times the amount that's in the Pfizer vaccine. So there may be little tweaks that occur, but I think I believe in my heart that everybody that wants a vaccine will be able to get that by the end of 2021.
That's excellent. And we won't be grounded anymore. I think we're all ready to not be grounded, right?
Everybody gets to come out and play.
Yeah. Exactly.
Dr. Box, I just want to say thank you so much. This was really helpful. And I think we need to hear from you and our health officials to calm ourselves in this unprecedented time. So appreciate your time. I feel very fortunate to have this time with you and have this conversation. Everyone, again, go to ourshot.in.gov.
Yes.
Let that be your source for information. For those questions we didn't get to, we will try to get answers for you and get those posted. We will also post the link to this recording because we recorded today, so you can share it with your neighbors and your bestie and your church people and all of the people, so you get the right information. Thank you so much again, Dr. Box.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Thank you all for joining us. This was fantastic.
Thank you.
Everybody have a blessed day.
You too. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.